The content, views, and opinions expressed in the following program are those of the producer and do not necessarily reflect the views and opinions of the City of Bremerton, BCAT, their officials, or their employees.
Hi, Bremerton and Kitsap. Welcome to Trash Talk. On this show, we have a chat with a local expert to learn more about waste and waste reduction. My name is Reama, and I cannot wait to learn more about today's topic. The weather is calling for gardening prep. Good growth starts in the ground. It can be intimidating if you've never done composting. Here to break down the process from kitchen scraps to soil is master gardener and longtime farmer, my trash mentor, and my friend, Casey Steimer. Welcome to the show, Casey.
Hey, Reama, I'm so glad to be here.
I'm glad you're here. So tell us a little bit about your background. How'd you get into all this?
So I was a chef, and I started, it's really where service industry, restaurants for a lot of years. That really burned me out, and I could see that happening. And, you know, I was a worker bee chef, so I kind of started from the prep room all the way up, restaurant server, bartender, all those things. At some point, I realized that this wasn't what I wanted to do with the rest of my life, right? There was more to it. And so I decided to go to Evergreen State College. And in that process, you know, what really called me was this extension of food, which became farming to me. Became like a really easy connection. You know, I come from a place of poverty where fresh food wasn't available to me. You know, that concept of, you know, food deserts and all that is where I come from. And so for me, it just became like the natural step into that. At Evergreen State College, I majored in political economy, which was a lot about movement building. So I'm really involved in community stuff. And then, you know, the heart of it is food for me. So urban farming became really my passion, and I think will always be my passion.
Yeah, I relate to a lot of what you said. Hamburger helper meals were common in my house, and now my family has a garden back home, but that wasn't what was happening when I was growing up. So fresh food was...
I remember the first time I had like a fresh tomato in my hand, and I was like 10, right? And I remember thinking, oh, I can eat it like an apple, and I did. But I mean that, you know, I just, you know, I had a couple cucumbers. I knew what iceberg lettuce was, you know, came around, you know, like I just didn't understand it nor know it. And then as a chef, you know, we're catering towards what people want to eat, and not always what's actually full of nutrition and what makes sense sustainably for not only our bodies, but the planet we live on.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. So then you got involved with Master Gardener program?
Yeah. So through the process, so Urban Farmer, you know, my first farm was 10 CSA shares on a house plot in Olympia, right? And, you know, that grew, and my desire to learn more grew. It's what I love about this field is I'll never know everything.
Sure.
So there's a kind of a couple things. So I'm a master composter and a master gardener, and how I was trained, those were separate. So the master gardener program is long. It takes a lot of time. I think it took me 3 years. For me, it was a lot of review in the sense that I already had a degree. But my master composting certificate comes from Tilth Alliance in Seattle in conjunction with PSE. And so that program really gets deep into how to not only have knowledge in compost, but also how to communicate that to your community.
Sure.
It's really about community work. I think out here in Kitsap, the WSU Extension has a Master Gardener program.
Right.
And then those Master Gardeners are teaching compost and teaching gardening. So a lot of times your Master Gardeners are the people in your community. You know, they're answering questions. There's sometimes hotlines. I know in Seattle, the Tilth Alliance, you know, that Master Composter program, then you do a lot of volunteer work. And so that's kind of this exchange. Master gardeners and master composters are then giving back into their community. Free education for giving back into the community. And this is what I'm doing right now, actually.
Yeah, I love it.
Yeah.
I love it. So what can you tell us about the topic of the day, composting? Let's get into it.
Composting. So, you know, I think it's really important to frame us like composting starts when you're standing in the aisle of the grocery store. It starts when you're making choices about what you're ordering through Amazon. It starts there, and there's all this stuff in between, and then it ends, you know, when you're thinking about what am I doing with this thing I no longer want in my home. And I think compost and recycling, they go right together, right? They're connected. So what do I mean by that? It means like I'm thinking about and I slowly integrate these things into my life. But when I'm standing in the aisle making choices, what packaging am I getting with those tomatoes? I love to reuse my bags. We all do. It was kind of this easy thing we know about, right? If I'm buying a can of something, am I going to recycle that? How am I going to recycle that? So those choices really matter. And then before we get too far into like what actual compost is, I think and recycling, I think we have to think about what happens at the end. I had a pair of jeans that I could no longer wear recently, so I cut them into squares, quick, no fancy, did the edges, and now I have napkins. Right? How much paper are you using in your household? How much plastic are you using in your household? How can anything of that, especially plastics, how many times can you reuse it? And I think that's such an important thing to consider, especially as gardeners, right? And especially as people that are invested in gardening.
So beginning your decision making in the aisle before you even bring the food home.
Absolutely.
Yeah, that's a great point.
I love when stores are offering, compostable, like if you're getting a container of tomatoes, they're in a compostable bin, right? They're in something paper. When you go to the farmer's market, you're probably not going to get any plastics, right? And you're buying your food directly local.
Right.
It's so important.
Right.
So that's where I think we have to start thinking about, and it can be a little bit overwhelming. At one point I was really dedicated to getting my whole house plasticless. That was really daunting, and it was really a lot, right? It didn't really work out, but I did make some moves in that time frame, from like my plastic saran wrap to the wax. The wax wraps.
Small steps.
Small little things you can do that really do matter.
Yep. So then once the food gets home, how does that work?
So I think there's also steps before, again, we get directly to the compost bin, because it's important to think about the amount of food that we have and how much food we are wasting. It's that simple, right? And some of that's about storage. Tilth Alliance, if you go tilthalliance.org, there's a ton of information there, and that's where my education comes from. So it's a resource that I use. And it's like, how are you storing your food?
Right.
What are the different ways? And there's a lot of people, as a master composter, I got involved in some of that. Best ways to keep things. What part of your refrigerator? How are you holding them? Are they going in containers? Are you washing them? Is there a piece of paper involved? Think about how you're storing food to reduce your waste.
Sure.
I think there's also things like, do your chickens eat your food scraps? Right? What other ways, before it just goes into a waste stream, again, how many ways and how can we reduce the actual waste?
I see. You're saying, how can we reduce the overall food waste before we even think about composting? There's
Absolutely.
A lot of avenues to send waste food.
100%.
Where it won't be wasted.
Yes. And I think sometimes that also includes planning your meals.
Oh, yeah.
Right? And buying only what you need. And we have, in this country, this tendency to just over-purchase. Where you go to Costco and we're buying all of this food. Well, what does that look like for real? And how much food is being wasted? You can add to these statistics, but I can tell you that 58% of the methane that's coming out of our trash facilities around the country, 58% of that methane comes from food waste. Food waste, because we're putting it in plastic and, that scientific process.
Right.
It's a lot.
It breaks down.
It really matters.
Yep.
So then we can start getting into actual compost.
Okay, we're here.
Do you think? Should we get there?
Sure.
So I think a lot about easy.
Easy, yes.
How do you make it easy in your life? How do you not have it be this difficult thing? Composting is so hard. It smells bad. What about rodents, right? We have all these things that come up in our brain. So, gosh, sometimes, if your local municipality has a green bin and you can have it at your curb, and setting up a basic, food waste collection system in your household that separates the food scraps out of your landfill trash, and you can put it into a green bin, that might be easy.
Yeah, that's easy.
That's easy.
Yeah.
And oh my gosh, that's huge props to that. Please do that if you can, right? If it's a little bit of extra cost, think about what that cost means.
Yeah.
So I think it's about setting up easy systems within your busy life, because we're all really busy. I don't want to spend hours thinking about where it is. So I'm setting up systems in my household to think about where my waste stream is. Right?
Yeah, I'm a real set it and forget it type of person. Like, let me set up a system one time and then do that until my system
doesn't work.
Or
I move, or
something happens.
Something changes in the family.
But I know that this is the process.
Yeah.
And I'm good with it.
I'm a systems thinker, so I have to do that.
Yeah.
Well, then, again, compost is going, hand in hand with recycling. Mm-hmm. So when you're thinking about our waste streams coming out of our households, how are you also recycling properly? One of the biggest things, and I learned through this master composting program, was a lot about the actual reality of recycling. I can get into that forever, but I'm going to just skip to the end, which is like the only things that actually get recycled are clean and dry. Clean and dry, clean and dry, clean and dry. And I think we have this tendency to be like, oh, put it in the recycling bin. Well, that can actually be more devastating to the what happens next than it isn't. Because oftentimes if your bin gets dumped and there's things that the sorters can't handle, whether it's a mechanical sorter or a human sorter, that just all goes to the trash.
It does. Wish cycling is a big problem. Yeah. So understanding what is truly recyclable and what's not, and not putting things that we don't know in there, hoping that it will get sorted later. It doesn't. It just goes into the landfill. If you got a can of refried beans, is one of the things that I always loathe cleaning, right? And I've dumped it, and there's all this stuff, and I left it overnight, and it's crusty, but then I just throw it in the recycling bin. Then most of what's around that is no longer recyclable. I put almost anything that goes in the recycling bin into the dishwasher because I can't with all that messy gooey.
Right.
I can't. So I just let the dishwasher handle it, and then I put it in the recycling.
In my system is I have a big bin. I don't have a dishwasher. And so I have a, thing that like soaks my dishes. Well, as my dishes are coming out of that, my recycling goes into that.
Using the gray water again.
Correct. Right. And because we have to think about water consumption. And if you're just getting started composting and recycling, don't get stuck there.
There are so many things.
But I do think about the water. I think about how it's used. And then I have a system where I have a brush. That's just for my recycling. It isn't for my dishes, right? And then that gets on the drying rack. It's clean, and then it goes into my recycling, and so it becomes part of my dishes process.
Yeah.
Now, if it's something simple like my LaCroix, you know how I love my LaCroix, that's different. Rinse and it dries and it's good to go.
Yeah.
Right. Other things we can kind of leads back to compost is pizza boxes. A lot of municipalities are having a really hard time with the amount of pizza boxes that are going into their compost. Green bins. Because it's not recyclable. Because it's got grease on it. It's not clean.
It's dirty.
So a portion of it is, right? Like maybe the lid is, but the bottom is greasy. So you're seeing a lot of different things. You're seeing a lot of pizza places putting down a piece of paper underneath their pizzas to try to help with that process. So those cardboard boxes are now recyclable.
Okay, love it.
But then what is a dirty pizza box in the composting system? Do you know?
What do you mean?
So composting is a lot about greens and browns.
Oh, right. That would be brown.
Brown. So it can be utilized as a brown. It can be utilized as mulch in your garden, right? Again, where are things going? And maybe it's not necessarily the compost bin.
Right. How do you, I like that way of thinking about it. It can make something feel overwhelming if there's too many options, but at the same time, those options are tools, and we get to use those tools as they suit our situation. So 100%. It's good. It's a good mindset.
Yeah. I think the other thing to, just before we move on from recycling too far, is once cardboard's wet, it's no longer recyclable either.
Right. People do not know that.
People do not know that.
Wet cardboard is not recycling.
Even after it's dry, it's not recycling.
Yeah.
Wax-covered, waterproof-ish boxes, they are not recyclable.
Right.
If you're ever in doubt, every municipality on their website, whether you're in Bremerton, Silverdale, wherever that is, they will tell you, right? There's always clear, and I always encourage people to either, say, you can order those things online and they'll send the pieces of paper to you that's exactly where things go, what your sorting process is.
You can get them at Spread Supplies.
There you go. Yeah. You know this. And so I think that's so important. And I think I'm going to take this one step further, Reama,
Go for it.
because I think we also can get lost. Like, I don't know about you, but I love to travel. I love to camp. And let's work on, take it a step farther is like, what does that look like as we're traveling too? Right? As, you and I are both leave no trace sort of mindset people in our community. And so just really thinking about what recycling and composting looks like in the bigger picture. I'm the person that has recycling bags and a little tiny bucket in my camping stuff because what I do so often, and I just put a lid on it and I bring my compost home.
Yeah.
Right, so that can look like many different things. It's the same bucket I use under my kitchen sink.
Right.
Right. So just those following it through as kind of a life commitment.
Yeah. That's important though, because as we travel, we go into different cities and into different counties, and they have different rules. Like Pierce County doesn't have curbside glass recycling, but most people don't know that, and so they're probably, if you're from Kitsap, you're going to Pierce and you're putting your glass in the recycling because doesn't everyone have that?
Yeah.
But they don't. So you really have to, if you are always packing your trash home, then you don't have to worry about that.
Yeah. I live in Pierce County. I collect my glass and I take it with me when I go to Seattle or Kitsap. And I was like, hey, friends, can I put this in your recycling?
Can I put my glass? Yeah, that's a great option.
Because I know that it isn't there. There is no municipal glass recycling. Glass is such an interesting thing. And again, another tangent.
I know.
But the neat thing about Seattle, and I think it is related to municipalities around Seattle, is because there was so much beer and so much bottling happening in Seattle in our history, there's an incredible glass recycling facility in Seattle. So you actually know it's being recycled properly, which is a big deal.
Right.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh gosh. Yeah. Large municipal situations.
Let's talk. That's a whole other conversation. Once the conversation around trash gets started, there's just so many avenues and topics.
Yeah, I love that.
Me too.
So where do we go from here? You want to talk more about compost?
Yes. Okay. Let's get into it a little bit more.
I think you had asked to talk a little bit about what a smaller apartment. Do you want me to kind of focus there?
Yeah, not everyone has a yard with even a garden bed or something like that. So I really want to talk about, and whatever works in an apartment will also work in a larger home too. Correct. But the reverse is not always true. So what apartment options do you like? Yeah.
So I lived in New York City for several years in Brooklyn.
So you are familiar with small living?
Yeah. And we did have a yard, but no, it's not that, right? Very small living. And so we had a small vermiculture bin underneath our sink.
What is vermiculture?
Worms.
Okay.
Worms. We love worms, specifically red wigglers.
Yeah.
Is what we use. Educating yourself on vermiculture is really easy. You can literally just look it up. There's so many things, but it can be overwhelming. Generally, when it comes to learning how to compost, I really encourage folks to do some education for themselves and then find a local class and take it. Get that hands-on, someone in front of you talking to you about this. If you're interested in something like that for your home, please get in touch with me. It is one of my favorite things to do, is help people set these systems up. But vermiculture is basically a process of putting your food scraps in. You got to cut them up to some degree, nothing too big, ideally.
Worms have tiny mouths.
Right? And then, they're set, won't get too detailed. I almost brought one today, but I didn't. They're set up high. The food scrap is going on top of a screen of some sort. The worms come up, they decompose it, and it comes all the way through their system and comes out. And then what is left, in the gardening world, that's black gold. It is one of the best things you can offer your house plants, your outside plants, your grass, if you're obsessed with grass. There's so many options for what comes out of that. And if you're handling your worm bin even generally properly, it doesn't have to be perfect, right? It's one of the systems I love because sometimes we forget about it. And you're like, and then it's fine because the worms are really handling themselves.
Right.
It really is not a system that you need to have so much control over. But we had just a small tub. We went through. I looked it up. I followed a process. I wasn't a master composter yet, but had been gardening and farming for a long time. And so all of our food scraps went into that. And we just eventually we had to split our worms because we had so many worms. right? And in Brooklyn, there's no food waste bins, right? So we had a small food waste bin on top of a bowl. Let's be honest, we're using a bowl. And then I would, every couple meals, because we cooked a lot, I would just dump it onto a large tray, chop, 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 put it in my worm bin. And then within a week, it's gone. And then they've turned it into this amazing thing. A lot of times people ask, well, then what do you do with the castings, is what we call that. The worm castings is what comes out of it. And if you don't have enough for your own, share it. Give it to your neighbors, find your local community garden. I would leave a bucket of free worm castings at our pea patch in Brooklyn.
Sure, people know what to do with it if you're gardening. You're like, oh, wow, that's a gift.
Or an opportunity to share, right?
Or just sprinkle it around.
I have definitely done that. Oh, look, that tree. You need some help, friend. Or, a lot of those, patches that we find in the city. The urban environment is so different.
Right.
Yeah, than a lot of what we're working on here. So that's one way. I think there's also so many consumer options out there. So do some research for what works for you.
There are some ready-made, packaged options.
Absolutely.
When we set up our worm bin, we got a big mailbox and drilled some holes in it and buried most of it in the ground. And then we put all of our food scraps into that and set it and forget it. Because we weren't really into it for the beautiful black gold aspect.
Looking for
we just wanted a way to get rid of our food waste without putting it in the trash. It was so easy. We got our worms locally here in Kitsap.
Nice.
Which was great. There's a worm farm not far from here, which was fascinating to walk through and see all of these tubs of worms in different stages.
Yes.
Who knew?
It becomes a thing. With the Tilth Alliance, again, tilthalliance.org, they have larger worm bins that you can make that basically look like, boxes with lids. Right? I've made so many of those in my time working with kids and working with different organizations. And those are going to be larger, but a lot of times I see those shared on fence lines with friends.
Oh, I love that.
Neighbors.
Yeah, that's nice.
And it's as long as they're in the shade, again, has to be shady. they also are a bench, right? So they have this, multiple. I've seen people, underneath what you're sitting on, and I've seen people add, armrests and backs, and so but underneath you,
there's worms.
Right?
Worms in action.
It's also a great place to put your cardboard, your dirty cardboard. It's a great place to exit your newspaper. Not magazines. We don't like magazines in there, but newspaper, specifically paper, shred.
In the worm bin?
Yes, because it's like their house. They need a substrate. So you can buy things like, cocoa, or there's all these things you can purchase to put in worm bins, peat moss, all these things. But I use shredded paper.
Anything that differs, from the landfill, get it out of that.
That's correct. Yeah, because once you start learning about vermiculture, that they do need to have what they're hiding in, which is usually paper.
Okay.
Straw, right?
Great to know.
Yeah. So what I love about vermiculture, especially in apartments or smaller homes, underneath dark places is where we want them. We don't want them in the sunlight. They're worms, underground creatures. There's hardly any smell. And you may get some flies, but nothing a little fly trap can't help you with.
Right.
And if you have too many flies, it means you need to clean out your bin.
Right.
And living in Brooklyn, we were in that apartment for a couple of years, almost 3. And I think, every 4 or 5 months, I would kind of clean it out, kind of start it over in the sense of new shred, new stuff, pull all the stuff out. But that's about it. So really low maintenance when you think about it.
Yeah, that's great.
Yeah.
Casey, it was really great having you on today to talk about some waste reduction techniques. I appreciate that. How are people able to get in touch if they have any questions?
Yeah, if you want to reach out, it's gleditsiagroundspruning@gmail.com.
Okay. Well, thank you so much again.
Such a pleasure.
As we try to reduce the distance our food travels, nothing beats our backyards and balconies. They're at arm's length, and that matters. In the modern day, when the only leaves we touch all day might be the salad on our plate, it's a relief to know people are around to help us grow things. Eventually, small steps cover big distances, so don't feel like you have to do it all to do something. Reach out to the Master Gardener program in your area and check their schedule. They likely have free advice booths coming soon. If you want to catch up on other episodes of Trash Talk, You can find them on the BCAT YouTube channel. Don't forget to like and subscribe. Until next time, use it again, Bremerton and Kitsap.
Thank you.